everyone, and welcome to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a special guest, Bret McCormick. Bret, thank you for being here. To kick things off, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. So, my name is Bret McCormick. I've worked at Sports Business Journal for 6 years, and I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm a massive soccer fan, and enjoying the watching the Premier League every Saturday morning with my kindergartner, and we watch Newcastle United and design our weekends around the Magpies.
Nice. That's not my team. I'm a Liverpool guy.
But you're wearing a shirt that looks exactly like Newcastle United, so just saying.
With saying that, for our viewers that don't know the company that you work for, Sports Business Journal, can you please share what you guys do and what it is?
Yeah, of course. Sports Business Journal is the trade journal for the sports industry. So, you have B2C outlets, which are, consumer facing, which would be like ESPN or anything that's kind of Sports Illustrated, any kind of content that's created, for the general public. We are B2B, so we're business to business. So we're writing about the business of sports for those that are in the business of sports. So for my beat, that's keeping the industry up on, I cover facilities, fan experience, and ticketing, which you could sum up as like live sports, basically everything involved with that, from food to technology to sometimes parking and, every aspect of what goes into live sports. And, my view of my work is to inform the people in the industry of like good ideas, best practices, show them things that didn't work, things that they should be aware of, and then kind of sometimes take like a 35,000 foot view of trends that, when you're in the day to day, you may not have the time to sit back and like think about it. And I do, because it's my job. So, it's an interesting job. I used to work at daily newspapers and covered sports, in a traditional way, B2C way. This has been interesting because I knew next to nothing about, the deeper parts of sports business. I'd never thought about sponsorship, other than, maybe noticing it once in a while. And so it's been very interesting to learn about all these, like the depth of sports, the business side of it, and the massive amounts of money that are going into it right now.
Yeah, huge projects in the millions, and even in the billions. Big mixed use development opportunities within soccer. I mean, USL's popping them out left, right, and center. With saying that, before I dive into the first question, I also wanted to ask you, like, why did you choose the career that you're doing? Why did you get into it?
Yeah. Again, newspapers were like my dream, and read Sports Illustrated, the magazine, every week. And I'm 40 years old, so I had a decade of newspapers when they were what they used to be, like 10-page sports sections, and I used to read like all the box scores and go through the agate page, and so I just feel fortunate in some regard that I always knew what I wanted to do, which would be write about something. Didn't necessarily have to be sports, but that was the way I got interested in the news and journalism, and um, you know accountability journalism, uncovering things, stuff like that are things that kind of excite the pleasure centers of my brain. So I can still do that um, at a trade journal, just in a way, in a business that is much more stable than daily newspapers, and much better economically for my family.
Understood. In the past 24 months, where has the USL's mixed use real estate first model actually cleared underwriting? And what single assumption most often breaks when it doesn't?
Yeah. Okay, this is a good question. So the mixed use development trend has like really exploded in sports. And so mixed use development has been around a while. I mean, the first ones were probably at this point are probably about 20 years old, but this, I would say, it started probably around 2017 with the Battery and kind of this like 2.0 version of mixed use development, which was much more geared towards creating like a neighborhood as opposed to just an entertainment district. The one way I kind of think about it is having local restaurants or restaurants that people from the area know, as opposed to, dropping in like a Dave and Buster's, a national chain that, is really just geared to entertainment. And so the Battery was in Atlanta is like still the bar that I think the sports industry is reaching for. But USL has been really central in kind of this idea of using real estate to be an anchor for venues and for the organizations, for the clubs and for the league. I mean, USL in a lot of ways is almost like a real estate business, and so where USL operates is really interesting too. The size of markets, and I think we're going to talk about this more later. But tend to be not the largest cities, but cities. I would say 80 to 500,000 people, and tending more to the lower side of that. And a lot of those cities have kind of a lack of maybe like a downtown or like a central gathering area, or copious amounts of entertainment. And this really picked up. Similar things are happening with minor league baseball. A lot of those markets can be sometimes quite similar. Like there's one really cool project and one on the way that are happening in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Chattanooga, which are also USL markets. Um, and this has become more popular after the pandemic because of remote work. So you had more people living in these cities that were choosing to live they wanted to be in a city, but maybe not in New York City, or somewhere that's more expensive, more maybe more crime or whatever. Just they wanted to be in cities, but smaller cities. And so a lot of those places didn't have that much stuff like this. So these two things have kind of like dovetailed. So you've had there's a bunch of projects that are underway right now. I mean, I think USL struggled for a while. They really were putting out a lot of renderings, but not that many projects were getting built. I would say in the last couple years, they've had a good stretch of projects, breaking ground and like really getting underway. So you've got like a really big one in uh, Mansfield, Texas, for example. I just reported on one this week with Miami FC down in Homestead, Florida. I mean, there's a slew of them. Greenville, I believe, broke ground this week with that, which is going to have a men's and women's team. Oklahoma City is moving along pretty quickly towards reviving a team that sort of went dormant for a bit, and that ownership group has Russell Westbrook in it. So, I mean, I would say right now there's probably a half dozen. Rhode Island opened this season, and that one I think is in a way like kind of kicked off this successful run for USL. They're still announcing a lot of projects. I think Boise is launching a team and looking at a venue situation. And I think the last I saw on LinkedIn, they have like already like 6,500 season deposits, which is
Yep.
amazing. Like, you just wouldn't like Boise wouldn't be the first on your list of like big soccer cities. So I think USL is really interesting because they are funding those places that, just wouldn't be on MLS's list, or really like the list of any other like of the big five leagues. They're big cities, they're good markets, but they just were not big enough. And maybe not a good media market necessarily, but with a league that I think is still its business is based primarily on, if you put real estate aside, on the game day experience. The actually going to the game is kind of how you consume it. Then there are a lot of places where there are people that will regularly attend these games because of the affordability, and it's a good amount of games, like 15 to 20 per season is especially in the summer, is a lot more doable than NBA or NHL or MLB. So yeah, I think the last few years have been very good for USL to finally start getting some wins on the board and get some of these projects going.
Absolutely. Um, they just announced yesterday, Riverside in California. Huge untapped market there. Boise's is leading in regards to club launches, season ticket holders. As you mentioned, 6,500. I think it was Portland, Maine before that held the record for USL, uh, specifically in USL One club launch. So that was impressive. I recently, a few months ago, went down to Rhode Island. Their stadium is beautiful.
Yeah.
Also came back from Spokane, Washington, USL One and USL Super League Club. Um, Phenomenal facility as well, or stadium, I should say. And I've been also been to Louisville. Louisville has a really
Mm.
nice atmosphere. So with what you're saying in regards to, I think one of the big takeaways was for me was in regards to like a few years back, USL wasn't there was a lot of renderings, but there wasn't a lot that was
Yeah.
coming to fruition versus now a lot of them are coming to fruition. And where do you see this going with the momentum that they have going now with all the success, as well as the momentum of, we just wrapped up the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup this year, but next year, the 2026 FIFA Club World Cup, what kind of impact and momentum do you think that's going to bring? As well, I'm going to add on to this. They just made a huge announcement. I'm not too sure if you've seen it yet, Brett, in regards to investment into league.
Yeah. I did see that. Yeah. I think so. I think the World Cup will be really interesting for uh, the U for the USL because they have a really huge footprint. Again, it's in markets where tickets might be more accessible than at the MLS level, where tickets are more expensive and there's more demand potentially. Um, so I think that will probably have a boost. I mean, it would be kind of crazy to think it wouldn't. I mean, it really did in 1994, and I think it will do it in a bigger way right now because the platform is already there. So national teams have a different energy to them than club soccer does, but I think that can carry over for sure. And I think too, I think one of the things that's happening with the more of the projects getting going, moving past the rendering phase is you're getting better capitalized ownership groups involved with these, and so they're have more wherewithal to bring them to life, and then I think slowly but surely you're seeing local governments kind of understand the pro forma of these venues better and of the league. And I think that is something like, for example, the Rhode Island is very valuable for. Um, Having one of these open that is going to host like 60, 50, 60, 70 events a year it shows the utility of them, beyond just soccer. And Brett Johnson, who's behind the Rhode Island project, one of the people behind it, had talked to me last year about the rectangular field as an asset class, which I thought was like very simplistic, but also like makes a ton of sense that the rectangular field can host more events than the diamond shaped baseball field. And so, they've announced this year that University of Rhode Island will be playing home football games at Centerville Bank Stadium. Undoubtedly, they're going to try to host, Brown versus Rhode Island soccer matches, football, kind of be the hub for Rhode Island. And again, that's something that was missing there. They had a really ancient minor league baseball stadium that I believe has been torn down or being torn down. But it's tough to play soccer or football in a baseball stadium, as anybody familiar with USL would know. And they're able to have more types of events at the new soccer stadium, including high school and marching band competitions and concerts and all sorts of stuff. So I think like the business case for the venues is starting to get proved out a little bit. Like there's some proofs of concept, and that I think could, I don't know if it'll snowball. That might be like an extreme way to say it, but I think it will help the momentum.
Yep, absolutely. To your point before in regards to, the real estate part, I think, if I remember correctly, I had Justin Papadakis on the podcast a few months ago, and he had mentioned, yeah, they do have a real estate department in the league, and I don't know if the other league has a real estate department, but to your point, yes, they are very focused on real estate, and it's one of those asset classes that our investors are used to and comfortable with, and as mentioned before already, I mean, these projects are massive in the millions to billions. And, even to the point of, what we're discussing now in regards to stadium, one of the big topics now too is having a training facility, making sure to have a training facility a part of the project due to it being an asset for players. It's their home. Developing players also could have front office staff there, etc. And it was one of those points that I'd asked Justin in regards to, you hear a lot about stadiums and not a lot about training complexes from USL. From my opinion, is my perspective. But it's interesting now. I'm starting to hear more a bit about the training facilities as part of these projects too. Side note, in regards to Brett Johnson, that makes sense 100%. And I mean, I can't even say that makes sense. It's Brett Johnson. Those guys know what they're doing, right? And when I went to Rhode Island, is like I think it was the Friday or I think it was Friday, the soccer game where they played against Portland, Maine, and then the next day. So after the game was finished, they transformed the field right into rugby. They had a championship
Mhm.
game on the Saturday. So I think, I mean, they're doing it in regards to, programming the facility for multi-sport. So I thought that was pretty cool to see. And to see part of that transformation that happens within a day is, quite impressive. Especially because they have these machines where they clean up the lines, they add the lines, they cycle the goals and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's interesting because you would think that I mean, just, between me and you, like before I got into like learning more about sport, like a soccer facility was only, or soccer stadium was only for soccer, but it's interesting how these owners are using the stadium for multi sports and, programming the facility year round.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so you mentioned Spokane, and then I believe this is the case with Mansfield, but they have pretty close tie-ins with like the local school district and are used, by local school districts for high school football and soccer and stuff like that. So multi-use a lot of times is kind of necessary to unlock public funding and public support. It also just like quite simply makes more sense to use something so expensive more often. I think that transformation has occurred at every level of sports. Even the NFL and other, um, especially like college football, where you really did have venues that sat there for like that were used like 9 times a year, and everybody I think understands now that that's sort of ridiculous and a waste. And to build a new one is really expensive. The price is going up all the time, so you need to really justify the expense by the phrase is sweating the asset. So you need to like really make it work and generate the revenue that was on a sheet of paper when you were describing the project initially. So yeah, and a lot of these, I would say most of them are using turf, synthetic turf. So, that's a question for purists or for players or for trainers. But synthetic turf and how that's kind of improved over the years is enabling multi-use venues in a way that was not as feasible in the past. I mean, I'm in Charlotte, and when the Carolina Panthers were bought by David Tepper, one of the first things he did was put in turf because they wanted to have more concerts. And so, I mean, I remember when I wrote about St. Louis City SC's new MLS stadium, they weren't hosting any concerts the first year because they were using natural grass. And anybody that knows St. Louis knows they have a horrendous climate, basically the worst of everything. So they were very concerned about maintaining grass surface, and so with natural grass, it is tough to host more events. You generally like would have to replace the field if you had a concert on the event level. So turf is making that like more feasible at especially the USL level, and especially if you're gonna have like high school kids playing on or college kids playing on these fields as well. So
Yeah, great point. What do you think's better, grass or turf?
grass. I mean, I think grass even looks better on TV. Turf has like a weird shininess to it on TV that just gives away the fact that it's fake. Especially like if the game is played at night, the lights will bounce off of it. But I mean, turf is in a lot of ways more realistic. It also generally uses less water, although a lot of turf fields do get watered to create increase the speed of the ball. But yeah, I mean, a lot less water, a lot less. I mean, in a world where the climate is very unpredictable and the world is getting hotter, I mean, turf makes a lot of sense
Yeah, for sure. And probably from a P&L perspective as well to host events,
for
stuff
sure.
like that.
less maintenance, less people to take care of it, less concern about, oh wow, it has not rained here in like 4 months. It takes a lot of stress out of it, I would say.
for sure. From you know, a question that came to mind that I wanted to ask you too is like, what are your thoughts on pro rel USL bringing pro rel to the US?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting idea. MLS is the closed system. I kind of wonder someday if MLS won't go to like two divisions and you can go up and down. I mean, for me, this is my personal opinion as a fan. I mean, Newcastle United's been relegated twice while I've been a fan of theirs for like 20 years. And, I pay closer attention to those seasons than probably any. Promotion and relegation is just throws a level of anxiety and inability to look away into professional sports fandom that, in my view, does not exist in the United States. Um, the closest you get to it is kind of the one and doneness of NCAA basketball tournament. But I enjoy watching a relegation match. A team between a match between two teams in the bottom four, like as much as watching Arsenal versus Man City. Probably a lot more actually, because I don't care for either of those two clubs. But um, the importance of it is like unbelievable, and then the fact that the financial impacts and what comes after is amazing. And there's nothing like that really exists in the US. So I mean, I think for USL to try to stand out in a very crowded professional soccer landscape in the US that also has to compete with international properties in a way that no other American sports league really does. Major League Baseball does not compete with the Korean Baseball League. The NBA does not compete with with Eurobasket. MLS is absolutely competing with the Premier League, probably losing, certainly losing, and also has to compete with a dozen other leagues, not to mention national teams and Liga MX for sure. More fans in the US than MLS. I'm almost certain of that. So I think it's smart by the USL to try to stand out. I think you can do promotion and relegation with a closed system that doesn't have a bottom where you fall out of it and go bankrupt, like has happened in England some. Um, but you can definitely introduce some interest into it that might take it above being a local property. You might have people that might pay more attention to USL more broadly than just we love to go to the Charleston Battery matches because our youth soccer team gets like really cheap tickets.
Yeah, super interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where things go and what happens and how this affects the league. I mean, it's a heavy lift. I mean, one of the new USL One club owners that I had met in Spokane at the USL Expansion Summit event, um, he was sharing on the podcast that we did last week that a few years ago, Pro Rel majority of the owners had voted no internally. They didn't want to bring Pro Rel, and I'm not too sure which year, if it was last year or this year. Now, majority of owners have voted yes, they want to bring Pro Rel, and they've made the announcement, and they're pushing to bring Pro Rel 2028, and it's an extremely heavy lift. And I've heard Justin Papadakis on a podcast online say, they're bringing Pro Rel, but it's going to be a customized Pro Rel. So I think it's going to be interesting, and I know it's something that's going to be extremely heavy to lift, but they're doing it. They're putting in the work. So I'm excited to see it come to life and what kind of effect it's going to have on the fans
Yeah,
and the growth.
I agree.
The growth.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Club owners in Europe, if they could start from scratch, would not have promotion and relegation because of the risk involved. But I think you can set it up in a way where there's a safety net, or teams aren't at risk of going bust. And I think I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but USL has kind of inadvertently set up a 3 or 4 tier system that would work perfectly for this. And you're in the bottom tier, then you're in the bottom tier. But there's a clear incentive to get out of the bottom tier. Whether I guess it'd be financial or a bigger cut of something or whatever. But I think having a closed system like that makes it more palatable for owners, who are the ones really like taking the risk. Also for sponsors too. I mean, if you're selling a sponsorship, then these are the markets that we play in this year, and then next year, we play in these much smaller markets. I mean, that has to be taken into account too. So it is a pretty dramatic shift to the overall business. As you said, a pretty heavy lift. But I do think it's a risk worth taking because the potential upside could be good. It's really difficult for um, the other thing too is if MLS and maybe USL switch to the FIFA season calendar, that'd be interesting to see too because I think both of them get just absolutely swallowed by the fall sports season, and it's hard to find out like what's even going on with them. Yeah, I mean, just because there's so much going on, so much other stuff going on. So I kind of think that might benefit both leagues as well. Again, there's like weather considerations to work out. Like if you're Minnesota United, you feel differently about that than if you're Houston Dynamo or um, a team in El Paso Locomotive. But again, I think that's another one that and it would line up better with the transfer market. And you mentioned earlier like practice facilities. I think that's an interesting thing for USL. Again, I think the capitalization of the ownership groups has maybe prevented more of those from happening. But I think it's been interesting to see some of the player trading that's happened in the last like 3 or 4 years from USL and like Louisville making what I think selling Winder for like a million bucks or something like that. So seeing academy products being sold overseas for what is perceived as a profit is it's kind of an interesting aspect of soccer business that you don't really have in the same way in other sports in the US.
Understood. Mm, do you see the schedule change happening for MLS and USL?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would say the answer is yeah. And they just have to figure out when they would take a break. There would be parts of the year that it would be too cold. And for because you've got Toronto, Montreal, Minnesota, New England. Some places where it would be. They would need under pitch heating and things like that. Stuff you would see in like Sweden or maybe Russia or whatever. So figuring those out is something they would need to do. It's I mean, it's not. I don't know. It's not so different of a problem of playing in Dallas or in Houston or Florida in the summer. It's kind of I guess it's easier to put more clothes on than shed them. But yeah, I think it will happen. I think it will help the clubs as well. The European transfer or the rest of the world's transfer window, being in the middle of the MLS season is really disruptive and difficult. And I'm in Charlotte, and Charlotte FC is like shockingly, ripped off like 8 wins in a row, which tied an MLS record after selling their U.S. men's national team striker to Derby County, and just randomly found this guy behind him, Tuklamati, the Israeli guy who's been bagging goals since. But there's a lot of cases where that would more often than not, you feel like that would not work out and not go well. So they probably got maybe a little bit lucky. They probably knew what they had with Tuklamati, but um, I think most people on the soccer side of MLS clubs would rather be lined up with everybody else.
Understood. Switching gears here, as a fellow Canadian, now U.S. green card holder, soccer lover, soccer fan, soccer player. So I played for 2 decades from grassroots to semi-pro levels in Canada, U.S., France, and England, and I love soccer, and as I'm sure you do as a Newcastle fan, and I'm not too sure, Brett, have you also played it yourself as well?
Yeah, I played through high school and played as an adult. But yeah, I mean, I was a decent player, but like, yeah, high school was as far as I went.
Yeah. I mean, so we're soccer guys. We love soccer, and to us, it's like it's a no brainer that soccer is the leading sport globally. Like everyone knows that, right? Besides the American majority of the American fans, because there's so many other options. You got NFL, which is the top sport in America. You got the NBA, NHL, MLB, right? So all these top sports and the MLS. So there's so many options for the US fan to choose of what sport they want to watch. And versus in Europe, where kind of like soccer is like the only sport sometimes, or as they call it, football. And, that's the main sport in most of the countries across Europe, South America. And what are your thoughts on the amount of options that fans have? You know, because it's kind of interesting. It's one of those things that I've been coming across a lot, over the last like 5 years of podcasting, where it's like a lot of people don't really know about soccer like that, or understand soccer, or are interested in soccer yet. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on, what are the impacts of having so many options within sport? And then next to that, it's a two in one I'm putting. And then next to that, how do you see like the World Cup affecting that change?
Yeah. So again, kind of MLS, NWSL, USL are competing with soccer around the rest of the world. So it's unfortunate for them. Not to mention competing with all the other stuff in the US. I mean, I would say I think second biggest sport in the US is college football. So in the fall, again, that's when your postseason is hitting up against professional and college football. I mean, that's not going to go well, in terms of interest or viewership. So it's also why again, my personal opinion, think the MLS Apple deal is bombed, because it's just made MLS inaccessible to casual viewers. You really cannot stumble on an MLS match. I mean, you have to like very proactively seek it out. Buy a special Apple subscription, not the Apple TV subscription that everybody already has, but another one. And I think after the World Cup, uh, having a deal like that would just be like criminal for limiting exposure to the game because uh, everybody has, well, a lot of people still have over the air, broadcast TV, which you can flick on a Saturday at certain times of the year and see the Bundesliga, La Liga, Premier League's on every weekend, and MLS matches are not on those channels. USL generally not, although they're on CBS and probably more accessible than, or on ESPN, probably more accessible than MLS. So I think a key part of capturing the post World Cup buzz that inevitably will exist will be visibility of the game on TV or streaming. Being able to watch games, because you can already do that overseas. You can actually watch more Premier League. You can watch more English soccer in the U.S. than you can in England. We're like very, very blessed in terms of the amount of soccer that we can watch. Uh, and so I think getting the U.S. leagues to that same accessibility and openness is going to be very critical because going to soccer matches is really fun. I mean, almost uniformly, it's a different environment than you find at other professional sports in the U.S. I know, for example, in Charlotte, it's very Hispanic crowd, which is fun, and the music is different, and there's drumming, and they do the posing on, you know what I'm talking about, where everybody like links arms and turns their back to the field and then jumps up and down to that song Pepas, which now my 5-year-old likes to listen to before school because it psychs her up. Uh, and never done anything like that at a Hornets game, and I have been told at a Panthers game to sit down because the people behind me couldn't see. So it's a very different experience to go to professional soccer in the U.S. Even to lower levels, I think is the same way. So that would be critical too, is making the game accessible for the in-person experience because it's very fun to go watch soccer matches. Also, a really great experience because it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes of your day as opposed to, going to an NFL game. You got to tailgate for like 3 hours. You're going to sit in traffic with 70,000 people for 3 hours. Everything about that is just so much longer. Charlotte FC matches are right by the train in Charlotte. I mean, it's literally like a 2 hour and 20-minute investment of your time, from going there to getting home. And the game never stops, the ball never stops, so it's just it's really good for kids. They don't lose attention as easily. And so I think all those things are great about soccer, but making sure that everybody can access that after the World Cup when they get some sort of exposure to the global excitement of it will be like absolutely critical to take advantage. Otherwise, that energy is just going to get projected into other leagues that are ahead of the American ones in terms of interest and following.
Interesting. You mentioned kids' attention, and with social media having effects on that for the young people. What would you say? How do you see this affecting sport? Um, you know, uh, Especially with like new leagues in Europe coming, smaller fields, lot more goals, different rules. Do you see traditional soccer potentially changing around the world, or and I mean, and as well too, I've heard listening to other podcasts where like it's like other sports have been changing, and actually it was actually um someone that I just had on the podcast really mentioned this to me. It was the chief operating officer of Top Right Soccer, where he had mentioned that other sports leagues in the US have been changing certain certain rules of the game,
Mhm.
and soccer it's like soccer has kind of been the same. I'm trying to quote him here. Not word for word, but I'm trying to quote him here. Soccer hasn't really changed. And do you and let me like kind of lay down the groundwork here. Like, you got basketball, there's a lot of points in basketball, a lot of action going on in NHL, and MLB is kind of there's a bit more points in soccer, but it's a bit slow there too. And what else do you got? So for those sports versus soccer, there's not a lot of goals, right? But it still captivates the fan. And I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, yes, this is where I was going with it. Soccer hasn't changed in America. And do you see soccer changing soon because of the attention of the young people, or do you see it staying the same?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the right question to ask because, you know, the the research is pretty clear that these youngest generations are not immersing themselves in sports fandom in the same way that, had been done for probably two or three or four generations. For example, I read the newspaper and I never liked baseball, but I loved box scores because it got me into stats. Well, no kid now is reading a print newspaper, probably not an online one. Um, so the consumption is going to be really different, which will lead to different levels of fandom. I mean, I would say even myself though, I really, uh, so maybe this is a good way to look at it. I mean, I'm 40, so I straddle sort of the old and the new. Like I'm able to live in both worlds like comfortably. Um, I subscribe to Paramount Plus for one reason, and that's soccer. And my daughter also happens to watch Peppa Pig on there, but we could do without Peppa. But I watch the extended highlights of like everything. Um, and so you could look at it as like, oh, well, Brett is not watching full matches anymore. Um, or you could look at it as like, wow, Brett is watching the 9-minute highlights of a lot of leagues, and is actually consuming the sport more by getting these like condensed versions of the games. Um, so I think that's like the way to look at it. I don't think that it means that people love the sport less. I think they love it differently. Younger fans, it's clear, tend to support athletes as opposed to teams as much. Like I think the first person we saw that with kind of in the US was like LeBron, as you suddenly had a friend who now liked the Cleveland Cavaliers, even though they had never been to Cleveland, or all of a sudden like the Miami Heat, even though they hated the Heat last week. So I think that becomes a bigger thing. That's why, bringing Messi over is a big deal for MLS because he's such a personality. I think video games like FIFA have been enormous for the growth of soccer in the U.S. and also contribute to that sort of cult of personality, or the fandom of like these big recognizable clubs. So I think soccer should consider, like, should consider everything. And some of it might be more of the format of the competition. Like, again, we were talking about promotion and relegation. Well, MLS could easily be construed as boring because, like, it has a playoffs, but like, if you're out of the playoffs by the middle of the season, like, what are you playing for? Because increasingly, the draft is not a thing, not a big thing in the U.S., like it is in other sports in the U.S. So that's the type of thing that I think to me would be a bigger concern, is like having a league competition format that's just not like exactly riveting. Um, but there are other sports that have definitely addressed, or done things to try to make the game more modern. I mean, the best example is baseball instituting a pitch clock, to which shaved literally like 30 minutes off of baseball games. I don't know that soccer needs to do anything that extreme because, again, like I said, the live soccer experience or TV soccer experience is like pretty good. It's very compact. It's one of the shortest things you would watch in major sports. So it's not like a wild investment of time that you have to make. It fits on a weeknight much better than a lot of the other sports, especially baseball and football. And so I think all those aspects are actually like kind of kid friendly. I think especially at the USL level, the accessibility of the game and teams and the players is really high. A lot of times those teams are doing more in the community than like an NFL team would. You could have a USL player could be your counselor at a camp in the summer, where that would be like far less likely with the New England Patriots or Dallas Cowboys. So I think all that stuff is sort of in soccer's favor. In terms of goals, I don't. I could be at risk of showing my age here, but like to me, I like the way the goals are because they're valuable. When you score, it's like a big deal. I would say in other sports, you know you may score more, uh, and so it's less of a big deal. I mean, you go to an NBA game and the 3-pointer that a guy hits in the middle of the third quarter is, I mean, half the people may be on the concourse, and getting a beer still or whatever. So there's just an importance to goals in soccer that I think is matched by like hockey. A hockey goal is important. Like you may not have many of them, and then when you do have a bunch in a game, it's like really exciting because that is also unusual. Um, so I think people understand that. I don't think they need to like necessarily just ramp up scoring or create 3-pointers or whatever. But the key point to me would be maintaining accessibility. Whether viewing or attending, it's got to be something that is um, paramount for soccer, especially to take advantage of what's coming next year.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really like that point. It's the first time I've ever heard a point like that. In regards to when there's a lot of points in basketball, but that's expected. But for soccer, there isn't that many goals as baskets in basketball, for example. But when they do happen in soccer, it's extremely valuable. And so, I mean, like, I'm not quoting you exactly, but what you said there, that point, I thought was really, like, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Like, that's a great point. Like, they're extremely valuable goals. Um, with saying that, switching gears to tech, do you think that there is too much technology being used in sport today in 2025?
No, I mean, I think it would mirror the rest of our life. So maybe is there too much technology in life generally? There could be. um, but I think it's just going to be part of our existence moving forward. I mean, how the technology is used is probably the bigger issue. I mean, I think like with VAR, that's what people get annoyed about it. Is it's sort of inconsistent, league to league, and uh, the way it's what's the word, like the way it's like uh, adjudicated is can be very like different and inconsistent and hard to know exactly like what can be reviewed and what can't. So I think that pisses people off because they just want sort of like uniformity. But I mean, do I think it's good that there is VAR? I would say yeah, 100%. I mean, to win or lose on a goal that you know should have been offsides is like uh is annoying and is not good for the competition, especially with the money involved and the uh the importance of this stuff and to people. And so I think having automating a lot of this stuff is smart and makes a lot of sense. I think it'll keep people from being like verbally or physically abused. Refereeing is not like a nice thing to do these days. So probably the more we can automate it, I think would be better for the competition and better for people. It's just less. You just can't argue it. It's right there. You saw the sliver of his arm was offsides. So probably too much tech, but I mean that would be the same with the rest of daily life.
Yeah. Switching gears here. In today's rate and construction cost environment, how are successful financing stacks splitting among public tools, whether it's TIFs, pilot, leaseback, senior debt, equity, and pre-sold naming or sponsorship?
Yeah, very detailed question. I will say I'll cop out because it's going to be different from case to case. So, uh, and if we were talking about USL, MLS, for example, could be well, any big pro league could be different. But if you look at the Chicago Fire, Joe Mansueto is financing the $650 million new stadium they're building by himself. So that is a very easy capital stack to describe. They'll have some, I think, like a little bit of public infrastructure money, maybe, but um, so that's the cleanest version of that you get. That type of money is not in USL yet. So USL is still, and I think will be for a while, highly dependent on public money, public contributions. I think that's why the partnerships with the school systems have been like really clever, like pretty smart. You've seen that with NWSL, which the Boston team is doing with White Stadium, which will have accessibility to Boston public schools. So I think that's like a pretty clever way to get investment and public money. Um, USL clubs at the championship level are, and this I had to look this up or talk to some people about this, but are doing between 3 and 4 million in sponsorship revenue annually, which is not bad. So what you're seeing there is like a good example is the Charleston Battery had Volvo on their kit. Volvo is based in Sweden, obviously, but has a really big plant in Charleston, and so they were kind of able to get that sponsorship from like the local branch of Volvo, and so those types of deals I mean, a front of kit deal or naming rights deal are going to make a big deal or are going to play a big role in the financing of these types of projects, and especially like to get them going. If you can land those early. Sometimes at this level, that's not happening till later in the game, but they would play a big role. I mean, arena projects that I cover are often you know. A large chunk of them is coming from pre-sold premium and naming rights and sponsorship. So not just naming rights on the venue, but naming rights to a premium club and then entrance to the stadium or whatever. So the role of sponsorship and premium seating in producing venues, like financing venues, is growing like considerably. And in part because those revenue streams are growing considerably. So, and then you've got, kind of like the Oklahoma City example where you've got Echo involved. So you got like a private equity group. Russell Westbrook's in that ownership group. So I don't know how much he's kicking in, but, an athlete that's independently pretty wealthy. God, he's played forever in the NBA, like almost my entire adulthood. So he's probably made some money. Um, and then that project also has a significant amount of funding from what's called MAPS 4, which is a taxing mechanism that Oklahoma City is using to pay for a bunch of public venue stuff, including the Oklahoma City Thunder's new arena. So I think that Oklahoma City example is pretty good. It's like a bunch of different sources. You've got kind of private equity, you've got like individual investors, you've got city money, and undoubtedly they've got some. They probably got some sponsorship deals or naming rights or founding partners or something type deals that are in their back pocket that they haven't announced yet, but that they undoubtedly would be showing to other investors to show, this project's got juice, it's got backing, we've got signed letters of intent, and you should add to the collection. So I think at the USL level, the public part of it is still like really, really, really critical. It is in other levels too, especially at the NFL level where the venues are so expensive that these billionaires are not willing to pay. In a lot of cases, they're not willing to entirely pay for like a $2.5 billion stadium. So they're also getting a lot of public money. But that'll be the case for USL for a while until the league, really, I think takes another level or two up in terms of financial performance and valuations.
Got it. Which sustainability investments have shifted from optics to the P&L, LEDs plus BMS, water recovery, solar canopies, low carbon materials, and where have they directly enabled new revenue?
Yeah, I like this question because I think it's an area that has got some legs for sure. So a great example is Intuit Dome, where the Clippers play. It's an all electric venue. Again, privately financed by one of the world's richest people. So this level of sustainability is probably not there for everybody because a lot of it's very expensive. So Intuit Dome has its own battery storage system, which I think there's maybe a handful of venues in the world. iAccess Stadium was actually the first. Um, and so what they have been able to do, and I've been told they've just started doing this, is operating an event at Intuit Dome on a third of the power coming from their solar array, which their entire roof is covered in photovoltaics. A third of it from their battery storage that they collect during the day, and it's very often sunny in Southern California, and then a third from the grid. So um, they're able to like lessen the load that they put on the grid to a tremendous degree. And the thinking is in the future that you could install battery arrays, battery systems, storage systems that could become net producers of power, and so they could begin selling power back to the energy company and to the grid. Um, that's a ways off, and that's a really, really, really expensive investment. But at the same time, you have all this stuff happening with sustainability, even with a president that is, kind of against that. It's still happening in the background. You have the development of technologies that just make these things cheaper all the time. And so that's still kind of just going on in the background. Batteries are getting cheaper and smaller. And so, I think there will be a day where venues can sell power back to energy companies. I think that would be an interesting, little revenue stream. Could be very actually not a little one. It could be bigger than that. Also, I think sustainability sponsorships are kind of an interesting, revenue generator where you can use sponsorship to kind of like subsidize sustainability efforts, and then the sponsor gets a lot of good positive PR, and then that way you can incorporate sustainable operations or technology or things like that you might not have otherwise been able to afford, and the sponsor gets to look in the mirror in the morning and say we're doing what we can for the planet, even if they're not in their daily business. Um, and yeah, I mean, other than that, I think there's still a long way to go on sustainability. I mean, the water and light automated building stuff is definitely um, helping P&Ls in a big way. There was a lot of waste with buildings, the way they were used. And that's especially important now because you've got a lot of really large venues that are hosting private small events. So you don't need the whole stadium on. You need a small portion of it on. So, I mean, I would say most major venues now have kind of motion operated lighting and things like that, and then have automated building systems to where you could literally set up the week. Like we need this corner of the building on this night because we had a corporate event. We need this corner of the building on this next morning because our staff has a meeting there. We need this part of we need the lights on because they're doing load in for you can set all of this up and it just does it by itself. So um, that's the low hanging fruit for sustainability and venue operations. And most major venues and all modern ones, have achieved that. So
Understood. Right. With
you guys,
saying that, truly appreciate you taking the time. There's tons for us to discuss on sport. But with saying that, I truly appreciate you taking the time for joining us on the One Soccer Nation podcast.
yeah, it was fun, and yeah, we could do it again and talk about completely different subjects. I mean, there is, yeah, like you said, it's kind of endless right now. What's going on in the sports business? Thanks for
Sounds
having me.
good. Talk soon. Thank you.